started the contact center network up just under, it's 12 months almost to the day. The first session that we ran was on the 30th of April 2020. So we're on the 29th. So we're near as much, damn it, a year into our COVID journey. And I set this up just to one more so for my sanity, and to help kind of stay connected to the contact center world as we're kind of shifting through kind of all the different phases that contact centers have been on. In the last kind of 15 months with the impact that COVID's had on, a significant impact that it's had on this industry. And I thought, what better way to kind of do that than to create a networking event that kind of helps people share best practice, share experiences, talk about challenges, and is a bit more interactive than maybe some other webinars. And that's why I kind of started this, is to get people chatting, to get people talking, and to kind of share a little bit of good value. And we cut that across the four main themes of what we talk about customer experience. So people, process, technology, and leadership. And we try and kind of stay within the realms of what's on this concentric circle as points of conversation and topics, if you like. Today, we're talking about people, well-being, technology, and leadership. So kind of cuts across a lot of those themes. And this is kind of some of the stuff that I do on a day-to-day basis with potential clients, and try and help people kind of navigate the world that is customer experience. And I talk very much from a operational excellence plus great employee experience equals great customer experience. And when we talk about some of these things, that's where we're going. That's what we're trying to do in kind of running these sessions, is to really talk about some of the things that matter in the contact center world. So as I've said, we've got a great agenda lined up today. We're doing a little bit of welcoming and networking right now. We're going to start the breakout rooms in just a couple of minutes, and then once we've done that, we'll move into the networking session, and then we've got the panel QA. There's a little feedback survey that I'd like you guys to get involved in, and then I'm going to tell you what other events that we've got coming up over the course of the next couple of months. But little introduction into the panelists. So if you've not been on the previous panels before, we have Marianne, and Marianne does an awesome podcast around operational excellence, and she runs her own business in Ruts Consulting. Eileen Donnelly, as I'm doing it, give a wave, guys. Eileen has near enough 20 plus years of experience in the corporate world, has experience as her own business owner, specializing in mental health and well-being packages for corporates. Graham is an expert in technology, and can help share some of the insights in what's happening in the world, and how we can leverage technology in a post-apocalyptic COVID environment. And then Joe has a wealth of experience in the BPO space, specifically for HR and recruitment through Sigma Financial. So I'm going to ask Sarah to start organizing the breakout rooms in the background. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up around four of the rooms. We'll give each person 15 minutes to kind of do that value share. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and I'm going to watch Sarah to give me the green light when the doors are open. But what I want you to do, as you're in the breakout rooms, it will be really dull if we just kind of have it. Not necessarily dull. Forgive me, guest panelists. It's not going to be a dull session for any of you, but what I would encourage you all to do is to really get stuck in, interact with the speaker. It is an open session, so what we can talk about is there's not necessarily any limits, but I think have a free and an open discussion as to what maybe has been some of your challenges over the last 12 to 18 months, and take some insights from the panelists and some of the things that they're about to share with you today. What I would ask as well is keep your cameras on, just so that we can keep the sessions engaged. Feel free to take yourselves off mute, and if there's any kind of elements of conversation that it takes, then we'll keep this all nice and fluid. And if you don't get an opportunity to ask a question in your main room, please make a note of it, because what we'll do is we'll add that to the Q&A panel that we do at the end of the session. So I'm just going to look to my co-host, Sarah, who's giving me the thumbs up. So when the sessions are open, you'll see a little notification on the room. It will say, join your room. That will put you into a session with one of the panelists. The panelists will be recording the session within the breakout room. So like I said, if you don't get the opportunity to see all of them, you can look back on them and we can share those after today's event. But in 3, 2, 1, Sarah, I'll let you open up the main rooms and then select your panel.
Right, let's assume that we've got everyone. I'm going to assume we have. So if you can get your cameras on, if you can, that's fantastic. So we can do this a number of ways. I'm here at your disposal for you to talk about whatever you want to. I have got slides, so I can certainly present some stuff. I take a very data-driven, evidence-informed approach to my wellbeing. So we can have a look at some of that. But how about, first off, I ask you to tell me, when it comes to well-being and mental health of your employees, what's keeping you awake at night? What worries you? What's niggling you at the back of your head? And then I can contextualize what I say according to what you tell me. What's your biggest worry?
I'll go first.
Oh, on you.
I was just gonna feel free.
Go on, Colleen, you go first.
No, I was just going to say, I think, so I work in a contact centre, and I think what we're starting to see is the uncertainty because no one knows when we're going back to the office. So there's no date on everything's going to be okay and it's back to normal by this date. And I definitely think that that is starting to weigh on people a lot more. Where we did it in March last year, it was like, this is exciting, this is great, I've always wanted to work from home. And now it's like, right, okay, what next? Because I want the human interaction back. Yeah,
that's a biggie, uncertainty. Anybody else? Paul, do you want to offer something?
Yeah, so like obviously I'm not from a contact centre, I'm from the Modular Analytics company. But we're in the same sort of situation because we're a fully remote business. So I think for us, probably the hard part is developing new starters. Because, you know, traditionally you'd have people, you sat shadowing you, you'd be learning your role, be sat beside you, you'd have a lot of physical sort of time together in the same room, understanding what was going on. And now we're trying to, you know, we're bringing on board, it's not too bad if you've got somebody who's experienced, but when you've got graduates coming through and things like that, it's really tough to kind of get them to a level where they can be independent without a specific sort of personality.
Yeah, that is a challenge, definitely. Anybody else for anything?
Yeah. I think one of the things for me that's going to be a challenge going forward is how people change their habits of behaving, because we've been stuck in this perpetual situation since March 2020, and you know it takes, I think they reckon on average 66 days to create a habit or something. So we've got lots of habits, you know, and you see this just walking in a supermarket and you see people looking at you like you've got a big disease on you. And it's like, how are people going to change those habits, particularly when they're going back into the workplace and they learn that habit of trusting each other?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting.
And working, if they've been furloughed for ages.
Even more so. Yeah, I've been hearing people talking about re-boarding furloughed employees. Yeah. And I think actually just looking at what you were saying, Paul, with regards to onboarding new members, reboarding those who have been remote, and reboarding those who were furloughed. So just loads of change. Anything else before I share some stats and data and whatnot with you? No? Okay, some really good stuff there. So I will definitely whiz through these slides to give you some context, give you updated information about where do we sit now, what we're seeing, and then have a look at those particular things and more. Throw more in as we go. We're a small enough team that we can throw more in as we go. So let me share this. So can you see that?
Yep.
Right. Okay, so the impact of COVID. I'm going to be specific here because we all know there's been an impact. So I think what's going to be more helpful is actually being a little bit more specific. Very specifically, anxiety levels have been super high, and we know that, highest ever recorded. And we know that because the Office of National Statistics would measure 4 things when it comes to our well-being: happiness, feeling that life is worthwhile, life satisfaction, and anxiety. Importantly, the first 3 have returned to normal. The one that hasn't is anxiety. And I'm going to say that I think that, Colleen, is because things are uncertain. We still don't know. But it's not been an even split, but we'll come on to that in a minute. Low happiness did double, but it has roughly gone back to normal. One of the biggest concerns across all population groups was this inability to save, not having that predictability of being able to save for the future. And financial worries are one of the key drivers of poor well-being in the workplace. So therefore, that's also then really important when it comes to low-income workers. So if you've got low-income workers and they're young, then their inability to save and the uncertainty, the anxiety is one big storm. So they are the most vulnerable. Renters, most likely to feel negative, and young people. And for me, I think this is probably one of the really important ones. Having a look at your workforce and saying, right, how old are they? It's 16 to 24-year-olds who have been the most affected by the mental ill health consequences of the pandemic. And 48% reporting loneliness. That is actually really quite high. And those are recent figures, as you can see, because it goes up to March 21. Okay, so just to dig a little bit deeper on this age profile, this is representing those who had a dedicated workspace and those who didn't and were probably working from a kitchen table or a sofa. So you can see in yellow, your 18 to 24-year-olds are those who have probably been working on a sofa or a kitchen table, compared with those who are older. And why is that so important, apart from obviously musculoskeletal, physical health? You've actually got quite a disparity between how they feel and how they've been able to work. So this idea of motivation, no distractions, separation of work and home life. But it's worth saying that even these people with this dedicated workspace over time have started to feel elements of loneliness as a result of the lack of connection with colleagues. And then those without this home office, no separation between work and home life, missing the interactions in work. And I think if you think back to when you were between 18 and 24, not saying that any of you are not necessarily still in that age group, but you know, it really was all about relationships at work. And that is one of the key drivers, one of the 5 key drivers, which I'll come on to in a minute, for well-being in the workplace, the fact that we have relationships with people in the workplace. So some significant results there for what it's felt like for people. And when there's uncertainty about, is this going to end? Am I going to go back into the office, or when, or for how many days a week? This is just preying on people's insecurity even more so. So what else? Oh yeah, 5 drivers. So there are 5 key drivers. We know this from a global study of well-being. The most important of the 5 key drivers is relationships. So that is the one that was probably impacted the most when it came to lockdown. And I know that some offices you need to book to go into the office. Some people are doing 1 day a week. Some people are still not back in the office. And some companies are talking about never going back to the office at all. So the relationship aspect, how do we solve that need for relationship and connection in a hybrid world? Very, very difficult. My favorite piece of evidence is the connection between productivity and well-being. So this is why it's so important. We're not just doing this because it's the right thing to do, because of course it is. It's a responsibility of every business. But actually, it makes sense for productivity and therefore your bottom line. So this piece of research was done by Jan Denev from Oxford Research Centre in BT call centres. 1.8 million call centre workers, tracking their happiness ratings over a 6-month period. They saw an increase in sales of 13% when there was a differential between unhappy and very happy. So we know it works and we know it's important, and that alone creates the business case for it. So there is that unevenness with who this is affecting the most, and it does seem to be that it is the younger generation. So the millennials, 59% of millennials are telling us that they've left a job because of mental health reasons. I mean, it still does go higher than that in terms of the age brackets. 30% of Gen X have left a role, in part at least, to mental health reasons. So it's having a massive impact on staff turnover as well as productivity. So just how much is this relationships driver important? Enormous. And I say this because this really needs to become a focus when you're looking at trying to improve well-being. So again, Yandanev, Oxford Research Centre, because he's done a lot of work into workplace well-being. We know that the share of satisfaction when it comes to job satisfaction, 86% is the relationship we're having with our manager. So we know interpersonal relationships is important, but it's the relationship we're having with management that is the most significant factor when it comes to job satisfaction. So, okay, so we know that. We know we need to focus on the line manager. But where are your line managers in general when it comes to their own well-being across the lifespan? Whereabouts are they? So this inverted bell curve is saying that when people are around about 45, 55, that's when their well-being is at its absolute lowest. So sorry, not great news. Gets better when we retire. But the key message here for me is your line managers are critical to the well-being of their employees, but actually they're probably the ones that need the most amount of support for their well-being as well. So this focus on line managers is really, really important if we're going to get well-being right. So just there are certain factors when it comes to well-being, again, evidence-driven, that if you follow these factors, I'm not going to cover all of them, there's lots to cover in each one of them, so we'll just focus on one. But if we look at these factors, these are the ones that are going to ensure a more successful, a more impactful wellbeing program. So very, very briefly, I'll come back to communication, but commitment is obviously leading from the top, committing to a program, it not just being a one-hit wonder. It's not just for Mental Health Awareness Week starting on the 10th of May. It's an ongoing program of wellbeing being integrated into the business. Consistency is about the fact that it actually does fit with the rest of the organization. We don't have a wellbeing program and initiatives that actually don't fit with what the business policies might be, for example. So we want you to feel good, but you're only going to get one break a day. Or we want you to feel good in your role, but you've got a bullying line manager. So consistency is really important. Coherence. So this again is, well, is it integrated into the entire business? Is it part of every area of the business? My goodness me, we can't believe in our breakout rooms yet. So the communication bit is the one that's really, really important for me. And that is the one that I would focus on when it comes to your line managers. So there's something that I run. It's an immersive training experience for line managers to help them have that supportive conversation. So that's something you can find more about if you want.
I was stopped in full flow. I'm just devastated.
Yeah, but I got your statement, so I'm going to share that.
I'm right with you there, Anthony. I was totally in my line there.
In the flow. No, it's some really good discussions, and I think it's
that was quick.
It's great to kind of do these sessions, and unfortunately they are only an hour long, so try and kind of get as much value in as much as we can. But if there are conversations that are starting to flow with people, then definitely encourage you all to book one-to-one kind of sessions from here and share that best practice and share that experience with each other, so that we can start building that continued community. But hopefully some really good discussions that happened across the patch in those short, sharp value sessions. What we're going to do now is we're going to move people into one-to-one sessions. So opportunity now, I suppose, to kind of get to know the person in your room in a little bit more detail, understand some of their challenges.
Like speed dating.
It kind of is, exactly, Anthony. That's the vibe that we're looking for. So it's, we're going to give 10 minutes to have a bit of a conversation around your experiences over the last 12 months. What's worked, what's not worked, what have you taken from the last 15 months that's particularly resonated? And then we'll come back into the final section of today's session and have a little bit of a Q&A. So if there's questions that have come up from the panel sessions that you've just been into that you want to kind of share and you want to build on, that is a brilliant opportunity to build that into some of the discussion for later. So Sarah, I'm going to go for a green light. The pop-up will come up again, so I'll ask you to join your breakout, and then you should go into a session with at least one person. There might be, if we've got an odd number, there might be a second in there, but it's an opportunity to kind of take those conversations.
Hi, Spencer.
Hello, Eileen. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm not bad. Thank you very much.
Good. So
you should impress people by trying to cover up the sign on the wall there. There we go. Pretend it's your house.
Yeah, it could be a house, couldn't it?
Yeah. Right, so should be able to share my slides now. So let's have a look. There we go. So tell me when you can see this.
Yeah, looking good so far. Yeah.
Yep. Put it onto present mode. So we all got big slides?
Yep.
Yep. Excellent. So the word for our session is paroxysm. How about that one? That's one for you to take away today. So what we're aiming for here is a little bit of excitement. And as Gary said, what we want to try and do is make it interactive. So I think there was a bit of poetic license from Gary around my introduction. I've never called myself an expert in anything, because we know an X is a has-been and a spurt is a jet of water under pressure. So I'm neither of those, but what I am, and we'll get onto that in a second. I'll talk through a bit of a background introduction, but this is very much a celebration of the 12-month, the first year, 12 months of the contact center network. And actually an awful lot of the people that I've seen on here today have been here for the entire journey. So hopefully you like Gary's little caricature I'll put up there. So happy birthday to the contact center network. So who am I? I'm Graham Bunting. I have a consultancy practice called Trust Business Partners, having spent, I don't know, probably 25, 30 years in the corporate world. I left that, started a consultancy practice about 4 years ago. And at the moment, we're representing a number of different brands here in the region, one of which is Cupid. This is not a technology specific pitch, but this is intended to be a little look at what's going on in the technology space vis-a-vis what we've all enjoyed or not enjoyed around being separate from what's been our traditional workplace. And Gary called me a geek. I wouldn't say I was a self-confessed geek, but I'm not sure which of these applies to me. So it says a person often an intellectual bent who is disliked. Well, hopefully not. Certainly not intellectual. I'm probably the one in the middle, which is an enthusiast, somebody who really appreciates technology, but not technology for the sake of technology. Technology that really adds value in a very practical way. And I've actually got some quite interesting stories that I've kind of experienced over the years that I think are quite amusing in some respects. So what are the aims for this presentation? Really simple, just stimulate some conversation amongst the group. Think about technology, but its importance around how it enables us as humans. So technology is great, technology has its place, and I think there's certain sectors of society that love it, but technology on its own is a little bit dull, I think. So not here to preach or teach, just to kind of share, create a little bit of impetus for thinking about technology in our work environments and how it works. And again, I've got some stories that kind of talk to that. So topic is technology as an enabler, and enabling is all about getting you where you need to get to. So much of the enabling technology I think we've seen, and certainly over the last year, is about disaggregation. So it's taking away the location from the activity. And increasingly, it's about how we can bring people together without the need for us all to be in the same location. And I guess topical for the contact center network, these are some of the themes that I think we're seeing. Certainly we've seen over the last year, and actually a lot of them now are emerging as we get to this back to the office type conversation underway. So picking out from that, we've got things like touchless. I think people are increasingly thinking about how they can get back to a safe work environment. But all of this technology is fine. It's about the people, right? So we're all people, we're all customers of somebody, and ultimately this technology has to serve us as people in terms of how we engage with organizations. So a little statistics, you may have seen some of these stats already. Actually, a lot of this stuff, if you're interested, and I don't know whether you know, but there's a lady called Dr. Nicola Millard, who used to have a funky title, works for BT, used to have a really funky title as, I think it was Chief Futurologist. She's got something way more grounded as the title now, but there's loads of really interesting stats that I saw her present last year. If you guys are interested, I've got a load of the slides that I can share with you, but I've got a few key points here that I think are quite interesting. And I guess increasingly, this is the tone of what I'm reading, which is 74% of consumers are likely to buy a product or service based on experience alone. So I know price and value and all those kind of things are important, but we've all had some really good experiences. I dare say we've all had some pretty poor experiences too. And they generally will, I'd probably call it the Amazon effect, and Spencer, who actually works for AWS here, will probably appreciate that. But Amazon, I think, you know, they've really set the tone for our expectations in terms of same day, next day delivery, and pretty much no quibble if we want to return something that's not quite what we expect. So technology and innovation. Let's take a look at some of the things that we've seen in the workplace that have kind of embraced technology to address this whole notion of disaggregation of location and activity. Can't do a presentation without talking about COVID, I guess. So we've seen a significant impact from the way in which we all work. We were all forced to work from home, work remotely, and actually for the contact center environment, that was a huge challenge, particularly for those people that had a lot of on-premise technology that was perhaps a little bit you know, well invested, but not necessarily flexible enough to enable that stuff. In terms of that whole digital adoption, that digital transformation, here's some stats that you've probably all seen. I've probably seen many times, I'm sure, over the last year. Forrester were showing us that people's digital transformation journeys have accelerated at such a rate. We've seen something like 5 years worth of transition and change in a very short period of months. So I guess we've all experienced that to a greater or lesser degree in our workspace. So just want to run through some, by the way, if anybody's got any questions at any time, just shout out, stick your hand up or whatever, and we'll pause. But what I want to do is just talk through a few things that we see in the marketplace that have certainly accelerated over the last few years, but talk to this whole notion of how technology is helping us do our work better, smarter. So this example here is about collaboration. And I think that top left picture will probably all be something that you've all seen, and maybe even in your own offices at some point, I'm sure. So we have walls and walls with sticky notes and whiteboard stuff all over the place, written lines everywhere, and so on and so forth. But that relies on people being in the same location. It relies on people being at the same location at the same time. So COVID clearly put the kibosh on that, and the whole idea of us coming together needed some technology to enable that. So we moved away from this very manual process where it was all real time, real location, typically single use, because oftentimes if you've got stuff in a meeting space that's confidential, when you finish your meeting, you have to lock the door. So all of that then moved into this digital world. So you end up with virtual canvases, with virtual stick-it notes, with people being able to dial in from any location on any device, share and interact. So that for me is a really good example of how technology has enabled us to continue doing the stuff we're doing. You might argue in a smarter way. It's not for everybody. All of these things are change, and we all fit on that change continuum somewhere. Some of us love it, some of us are not so keen, but ultimately that's how technology is helping us in that space. It is another great example. We have a typical environment where you enter an office and you're greeted by a receptionist or somebody who is front of house. Nice smiley individual, hopefully, unless it's the doctor's surgery, in which case you get to speak to somebody, they take your details, they tell the person that you're meeting, and then you either get directed to where you need to go to, or they'll come and meet you in reception. What we're seeing now is a lot of technology which is removing the human from that situation, and actually replacing them, not necessarily completely removing, but replacing them with screens. So you walk into an unmanned or unpersoned reception, you either press on a button on the screen, and then you're connected via video with a human being who you can interact with. And you can set these things up to work on just QR codes. So oftentimes you don't even need a display in the reception, just a QR code. You can then have a conversation with somebody who can do all the same stuff that a receptionist would do in terms of greeting you. But some clever stuff that you can do beyond this is, once you've checked in, they can give you some directions with arrows or other things, and using multiple tablets, they can hop or teleport from tablet to tablet. So as you're walking down a corridor, for example, they can pop up in front of you and say, "Hi, it's me again. At the end here, turn left," and so on. So this kind of technology is all about disaggregating, again, bringing out people from that reception desk, putting them elsewhere in the organization, but still making them available to greet people. And this is what we're doing now, right? So I guess we've probably all experienced every flavor of meeting technology going. Zoom still seems to be doing remarkably well, but I think Teams has started to perhaps regain some ground, and I think Teams has become a real driver for a lot of the other technologies that we're seeing increasingly with unified comms, with other contact center solutions. People are looking more and more to consolidate things into fewer desktop applications. So, integration is all becoming quite important. And of course, we've moved away from good old letter writing to electronic forms. And again, Teams comes in here, email, etc. But I think you often find things go full circle. So receiving a handwritten letter now is potentially quite high value. And oftentimes you'll find people, when they're looking to make introductions, they're looking at new ways of doing it, or perhaps revisiting old ways. So bringing in this kind of old way of doing things has a certain value. And then bringing it into perhaps some of the current things that we're all thinking about, going from contact center agents to perhaps robotic agents. Well, perhaps not. So I think that's a common fear. I think many people working in our environment seem to be concerned about automation, technology, robots replacing us. I don't buy that personally. What I do buy is that these technologies are here as an augmentation and a support mechanism, because increasingly, increasingly we are both demanding and opening up other channels of communication into an organization. So we've gone from call centers where we had a telephone number and would ring in and we'd queue and get to speak to hopefully a helpful agent. Increasingly, we're getting more options. So we now have the ability to send an email, which comes in different forms. So it might be an email address or a web form, etc. And then we start to get additional things being added into the communications capability. As
where I started, this slide really talks to the fact that what we're enabling now is the ability to bring in multiple channels, but actually recognize that the customer has a choice. So whichever channel the customer chooses to come into, and it could well be that they choose to come in on a voice call, they could hit a significant queue and then have an option through the IVR to deflect into an automation self-service channel. So the customer could then be simply shifted at their behest to, let's say, a chatbot or a WhatsApp discussion, and then they hopefully sell themselves successfully. But if not, the option's always there, either through automation, understanding and interpreting the sentiment of the conversation, or electing to escalate to an agent. The great thing here is that it's a single conversation, a single uninterrupted conversation. So should the option arise and the customer ends up talking to an agent, then the agent has all the context from the persistent chat, so they can see exactly what that particular customer has been doing, and then they can pick up that thread and help them out from that particular standpoint. So this is really where artificial intelligence is adding huge value by helping customers serve themselves, putting intelligent conversation and communication in place, understanding their intent, but also with the Cupid platform, the ability to capture that entire conversation and interaction such that the agent is well prepared. So, you know, this is all about augmenting that customer journey for both the customer and the. So loads of ways in which we can automate, but technology really is the enabler for that. It really is all about the customer interaction. Cupid really takes the two ends, if you will, and glues them nicely together by leveraging all the tools. So if we look at the left of this particular slide, we can see customers arrive in an organization for a number of different reasons. You can see the list here. I want to order something, I want to report something, I want to locate something, I want to find information, I want to make a payment, etc., etc. So we arrive at the organization with an outcome in mind. On the other side, the business is receiving the interaction. They need to check and validate certain things. So they're looking for confirmation of who's on the call, who's making contact. Can you validate it? Have you got an order number? Have you got an account number, etc.? And in the middle is where Cupid sits with all the tools and the back-end processes to make that journey as friction-free as possible. So, you know, this is all about joining those two pieces together in a very seamless fashion. A few statistics that we've pulled together, I mentioned earlier in our presentation, where we sourced them from. So if anybody's interested in more of that, do let me know. But this is all telling us that as consumers, we're looking for simplicity. So 75% are saying they're buying more things from customers, that businesses that make it easy for them. Amazon's a really good case in point, isn't it? I know they've kind of captured the market a little bit, but they make it so easy for us. Some might say too easy. You know, with one-click purchase, the ability to get stuff same day, next day, that kind of stuff. So it really is a very simple, frictionless process. Sadly, lots of organizations are doing a really bad job of this, and I think this probably talks to this whole idea of this tactical implementation of additional channels. So, you know, as customers are demanding and as levels of interactions increase, organizations have looked to adding digital services, so WhatsApp, SMS, Twitter, Facebook, etc. But by and large, these things have not been done in a coherent fashion. So you end up with a Twitter channel that's largely manned and run by the marketing teams and corporate, pushing out messages, you know, perhaps picking things up, listening for comments and adding them, but actually it's not really joined up with the core of the business, the contact center. So I think the school report says could do better. It's all about bringing these into a single experience. People do like these technologies. There's very much a demographic around it, so they're not for everybody, but actually it's about meeting people on their channel of choice. And we see right here on the right hand side, there is a significant expectation now that organizations are going to start to deploy some of this smart technology to make that the customer journey and actually the experience in engaging with that organization better. So a few examples of use cases across different industries using AI and automation to meet customer need on their channel of choice. So we believe that it's critical to provide a choice to allow customers to access services as they want, sorry, when they want, and how they want. So this particular example, you can see it's a city council example, but this is a simple transaction. So we arrive on the website, you see it's a just-in-time app type experience. So it's not an app, this is just an app experience. So we can automate a lot of the common processes. In this particular example, you can see the ability to search for things like reporting. So I might want to report fly tipping, report potholes, etc. So I can do it very, very simply on a just-in-time app experience. But actually I can also send additional information. So I can take a photo from my smartphone and send that in along with location information using things like what 3 words, for example. So we can send all that stuff in without having to go onto a website and search through it. So it's about making that guided experience very efficient and dare I say enjoyable for the user. is another typical example. This is for housing or searching for accommodation, and we see in this particular case it's about triage. So we start off gathering some information, or in some cases we might actually point them in another direction. So for example, if you take housing, there are certain circumstances where before they apply for services, they need to register elsewhere. So we can effectively deflect, but actually through an information page. So let's say we're looking for this information, we can then send them with a link through to another location and bring them back. Well, they can come back later and complete that particular transaction. So we can still give them the option to get through to an agent, but actually we make sure that before they arrive at the agent, all the steps are in place so that their journey and the agent experience are better. And of course, what we've talked about here is the proliferation of channels. So, you know, we've got a couple of examples here. This is an insurance company where you can see we're leveraging the infrastructure of the chat services, so WhatsApp and SMS, for example. So we're clearly limited by what the interface in those circumstances offers, but you know, there's a fairly rich capability to have a persistent conversation. I think that's one of the real benefits, is the fact that the conversation is persistent. So we can see the entire conversation journey, as can the agent on receipt of the call. I think the other important note there is that it is a common experience. So whichever channel they come in, they're having a similar a similar experience, because we've built the experience once and then we can deploy it across all the channels. And outbound as well. So here's a great example of how organizations are potentially using this platform to notify customers, for example, past dues, and then we can give them a link to come back into the business portal and make a payment. So, you know, this is very much about automating, sending a piece of information to a customer's mobile phone, and then they can action that even if they're traveling to work, on a bus, on a train, or whatever. It could be an asynchronous type of conversation, for example, if they're using WhatsApp. So lots and lots of different ways. It's about understanding your customers, it's understanding the tools that your customer's using. But automating this takes your cost of transaction down to a trivial cost versus putting an expensive agent making lots of calls, bringing people in. So there's a limit to what they can do. And of course, you know, technology, automation, it's a 24/7 type operation. And here's I think hopefully a nice summary page. So this is left-hand side, allowing, or I suppose opening up rather than allowing, opening up different channels for customers to come in on. And you know, we're seeing more and more of these appearing all the time, like Apple Business Chat and so on and so forth. So all these different channels are the route in, and in some cases the route in could be they've hit the IVR, it's a very busy day, the queue times are ridiculous, and we've given them the option to self-serve, and they'll then come back in via a digital channel. A conversational interface, which is a just-in-time web app type feel, mobile app type feel, using context, so we understand who they are and what's been going on. And you can see in this particular example, using the AI, we know that this guy, Dan Adler, has a credit card application pending, and therefore that may well be the reason why Dan's been making contact. So we can then push him an option that says, do you want an update on your application? We also enable natural language. So if we look at the bottom, the smart options are there because we know they're the most popular things at this time, but actually it might not be one of those options, and then Dan can simply type in what he's looking for, and using natural language and predictive, it can offer, you know, the types of services that are available. And then back end, we automate. So this is about doing, it's not just about a conversation. So we can automate an entire process. So it might well be that payment process. So we've sent an SMS, they've come in, yes, I want to make a payment. We can take them through to a payment gateway, make that payment with PCI and HIPAA compliant. And then we serve that particular customer with that automation journey. If, however, they get stuck in that journey, we can pass them to a voice channel to speak to an agent, and then when the agent receives the interaction, they can see everything that's happened up until that point. They can greet the customer personally. The customer feels like they're valued because you know who they are. And here's just a few examples of how that same experience is built across different platforms. So whether it's SMS, whether it's a just-in-time web app or WhatsApp, we're fundamentally giving them the same experience, but we're using the framework that exists. And then finally, I guess this is a summary. This is all about creating thoughtful customer journeys. So understanding who our customers are, how they're arriving, what they're looking for, understanding the sentiment of their reason. So we know probably before they arrive what they're likely to, what their mindset's likely to be. So, if we're chasing them for payment, they're probably not going to be feeling great about being chased. So we need to be on our mettle to make sure that we still try and make that conversation or that engagement as pleasant as we can. So this is really bringing all of that technology into play to augment that customer experience. And finally, I think the point there is it's avoiding all of that repetition, which we all know is incredibly irritating. So once we've told the organization by typing it in or responding to an IVR, the last thing we want to do is when we get to an agent is to have to repeat that. So all of this is about creating those thoughtful joined journeys. Last couple of slides here. I think Gary was asking whether there were some tips and ideas, and I think here's some really simple stuff that I'm sure many of you are doing already, but if you're not, it's worth checking. So first off, if you haven't done it already, then it's certainly time to start looking at cloud-based applications. It gives you that huge flexibility, it gives you that agility, gives you that ability to stretch up and down very easily. And of course, it enables the stuff that we've seen certainly for the last year or two, which is that flexible working. One of my big bugbears is understanding what your customer experience is like. So what I would say is check that customer experience. Is it what you're expecting? Is it what you want for your customers? I think a lot of C-suite executives don't really understand what the customer journey looks like. So check it and make sure you know what it looks like and make sure it represents what you want it to represent. Digital transformation has been talked about for years and years. It's well underway, and I think we should use this as the opportunity to consider consolidating a lot of these areas of technologies, making sure you're not building complexity on top of complexity, but using the opportunity to simplify. And I guess in doing that, look at the long-term impact of your investment decisions. Ensure that you're not taking yourself into a cul-de-sac. So you're not painting yourself into a corner. There are some technologies that are perhaps mainstream and are broadly available, others perhaps less so. So make sure that when you're investing in these technologies that you're not reducing your options. And to the next point, what you can manage yourself means it gives you that much greater business agility. So in the case of the technology I've spoken about, the Cupid stuff, it's a no-code, low-code solution, which means you can build these interaction journeys yourself in-house without any reference to any external agencies. That can be a real game changer for the customers. And coming back to this other point about digital transformation, platform, reducing the number of platforms, are you leveraging that? Take a look at how your platforms all interoperate. So, you can reduce the real estate on the desktop. And in saying all of that, what I would suggest is it's probably worth investing time with people who are not necessarily vendor aligned. So you're going to get best advice across all platforms, all technologies. Probably worth investing that time with a consultant to get best advice. So I guess in order to deliver on customers' expectations, it does require a little bit of effort, but effort up front, bit of planning will ensure that you get the reward. So best view comes after the hardest climb. Make sure you do the hard yards and then continue to iterate and make sure that customer experience is what you would expect it to be. And I quite like this one. It's an NLP presupposition. There is no failure, only feedback. NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, not natural language processing. This really talks to the notion of how you see things. So constantly looking at what the feedback is from the customer, even if it's an angry bit of feedback, consider that as an opportunity and make sure you take that into consideration when you're thinking about those customer experience journeys. And finally, I quite like this. I thought I'd share this with you. This is actually a genuine call center conversation. I know you can read, but I will read it just for simplicity in case you're listening to this. So the customer says, I've been ringing 0700, 2300 for 2 days and can't get through to inquiries. Can you help? The operator replies with, where did you get that number from, sir? The customer says, it was on the door to the travel centre. The operator replies, sir, there are opening times. And there's many, many stories like that, which I think can be So in closing, I've been Graham Bunting from Trust Business Partners, currently representing Cupid and other vendors here in the region. My contact details are here. I can be reached at graham@cupid.ai too, or 0800 999 1882. Be good to speak to you.
Now, but we were all just in such panic, weren't we? If you think back to March last year, and we all said, okay, agents, all just go home and do your best. Just do your best. Whatever you've got, do your best. And in true British style, we all went, brilliant, we'll do our best. And now as leaders, we're having to transform that way of working to go, actually, that isn't good enough. And those behaviors that you've got into and some of those bad behaviors that we're seeing, we've now got to rein those in a bit. So we go from leaders who were in as much panic as the agents were to just saying, do your best, to now leaders who are going, actually, we've now got these expectations and we've got to set those expectations for working from home and working blended office or just office. And for a leader who's gone from the shock and panic of literally driving laptops around and delivering them to our agents' houses, and we've seen big organizations doing that, haven't we, to now trying to behave like everything's normal and we're all in control.
But not.
And we're not. And all the whilst, all the agents going, I just want to be communicated with and I just want to know what we're doing. And actually, none of us really, we're all coming out with different narratives, aren't we, of what we're doing, but no one really knows. And I just think to be a leader, and we've all been through cycles of big recessions and all the rest of it, but this is more challenging than any of us have ever been through in terms of leadership, isn't it?
For sure.
No, definitely. And I think as well, like you say, as leaders, you know, I think everybody, you know, we should celebrate in our industry what a brilliant job everyone has done over the past 15 months.
Absolutely.
I think everyone's done a brilliant job. So leadership skills have really been tested and it's been amazing to see. But I do agree with you, Katie. I think the next few months moving forward are taking that to that different level, aren't they? Yeah. When, you know, I was looking at some research this morning and it was saying that on an employee survey I was reading, it was saying that, you know, 25% of our employees at the moment are worried about losing their jobs. 43% feel working at home, they're increasing their workload. So again, these are all things that leaders have got to deal with, as well as constantly being asked, you know, what's happening? Am I going back to the office? And it's a difficult one, isn't it? So anyone else have any thoughts on that? Were you going to say something, Annalie?
I was just agreeing. I was actually grateful that somebody else said, you know, well, we're all struggling, we all don't know where it's going to go. So it's not just me.
I had a question, Joe, and I think this is interesting, just jumping on the topic that you talk about are we continuing to be remote? Who's going 100% remote? Who's going hybrid? And it was a HR style question that came up in a conversation I was having with somebody who Katie introduced me to, actually. So thank you very much for the intro. And it was in a 100% remote setting, and for those that are now moving into an environment where all of their staff will be working from home, and even those that might be hybrid. Katie's point earlier, we've driven around with loads of laptops, dishing them all out to all of the teams, and we've created these working environments at home that maybe aren't 100% conducive to good working environments. And what's your thoughts and in terms of what the future of that 100% remote working model is going to look like in desk assessments, base units, monitors, and all that kind of stuff? Because I think we're opening ourselves up to potential litigation if we don't get that right.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's a really good question. And I think from the whole going back to the workplace, you know, what I'm encouraging, you know, people to be doing at the moment is doing like the COVID risk assessment. So the health and safety, you know, there's lots of, or I can send people links, but every organization should be thinking about, you know, doing the COVID risk assessment, you know, consulting with their employees, because as we've all said, you know, people have been now working at home for 12 months. So for some people, I think they're keen to get back. I think for other people, they're not so keen to get back. But the thing as well is, like we've said, you know, last March, people thought this was going to be for a few months. So people could, you know, sit at the kitchen table, sit at the dining room table, sit in the conservatory, wherever they are. Whereas now we've got to think about, well, actually, if this is going to be you know, if this is going to be moving forward, that we are, you know, going to be working at home, you know, we've introduced lots of online testing and DSE and all of that type of thing that we've been doing. But I think it's bigger than that as well, because I think if an organisation is going to be saying, right, you are working at home. I saw an organisation a few weeks ago gave their employees a couple of £100 towards making their space their own and safe, etc. But I think that's a big thing for companies to think about, because from my world of the HR world, one of the risks I can see in the future with my own team are that people could potentially in the next couple of months be saying, as an example, you know, I've you know, my chair's not right, you know, I've got a bad back, or things like that. And I think that's something else we've got to think about. So I would encourage all people to start doing the COVID risk assessments. I can send templates if you wish, and really start consulting with their employees on that, because I think as well that there is going to be a cost. So companies see that they're giving up office space and things, which is great, but I do feel there's some cost to make sure, you know, moving forward, people have got the right equipment, etc. Some people have contracts to say, as an example, they're responsible for this, that, and the other. But I do think it's something that everyone needs to really look at, and you know, whether they need to change some of the terms and conditions in contracts and things like that. So I don't know if that answered that, Gary.
Yeah, I think it's a like you say, it's a big question for people to think about.
Yeah, for sure. Can I pick up on that, Jo, if you don't mind? Just like to say that I totally agree with you with the risk assessments, and that's mainly what we're doing a lot of ourselves here at BTT, is working with our clients, new and old, on, obviously we all work in a world of technology, and which has been really fruitful, and we are very lucky in the society that we work in, that we've had that adaptability over COVID to be able to transpire and use our technology source at home in this obviously climate. But for some companies it's not been that easy. Like Katie suggested, we've had to get lots of laptops and everything to home, but it's now putting in them risk assessments for the longer term. That happened, but it's now making sure they've all got the data connections, the suitable reliability in all of their obviously working platforms to cover the staff for longer term periods rather than the short term. So we're doing a lot of and a lot of companies have shut their offices down now and working from home more predominantly. So
I was stopped in full flow. I'm just devastated.
Right, excellent. Thank you very much for joining. And if you have expected a presentation how Erlang works, then you are in the wrong room. That's not me. It's basically when Gary said to me, well, you need to talk about workforce management, and can you share with us how you see this happening and how operational delivery is done? I thought, well, I would really like to have a discussion around what we recently saw coming up in the press, where we are hearing and seeing notes and comments around, well, the contact center industry is now actually controlling what their people do when they work from home. They are spying on people, and the actual productivity is nowhere near what it was supposed to be. And you know, scheduled attendance, everybody can switch the PC on and pretend they are there. Now, as a contact center enthusiast, and I love operations, I thought, how dare you? I trust my people. And then I shifted to, actually, when we are in center, we, quite frankly, we walk the coal floor, we watch what people do, we implement the clean desk policy. So therefore, we probably would not allow a cup of tea with no lid on, and probably no paper, especially if we work in a regulated environment. So how do we bring these two together? And then something else came to the forefront, where I was thinking, hang on a second. We have up to a year ago, we had a professional business life and we had a personal home life. And we walked from one to the other, and we kind of managed to an extent to leave our relative other part of the life where it belonged to, business and professional into the workplace and private at home. And I remember more than one conversation where I would have brought somebody in, maybe a team leader or an agent, and he would have said, oh, I have a really tough time at home. And yes, absolutely, I went out of my way to help them, support them. But in the back of my head, I expected, hang on a second, leave your personal problems at home. You're here at work and you work. Now the pandemic has changed that dynamic. If you work at home, you have no choice than also being interlinked with your personal private life. And not everybody has an office where they can just do things from home. So I would like to put two statements into the room and hear what you feel and what you think about that. The first one is, operational delivery is not just about being motivated and helping people to do their best. It's just as much about diligence and discipline. Versus, or equals, also, we must start to bring the professional and the personal lives together. We cannot treat them in silos anymore, because that's what we have seen for the last, let's say, 14 months. And I'm wondering how you see this. I have recently just done some work in a Romanian contact center where they, despite they handled the pandemic slightly differently to us, but their view very much was, well, it doesn't make much of a difference. I can put my professional hat on and there is no challenge. On the flip side, also recently in a German contact center in Berlin, where people told me, well, how do you expect me to work? I live in a 2-bedroom flat. I share it with my partner, and you expect me to provide a service. So how do we marry these two going forward? Because the working from home model clearly is here to stay. Does anyone have any views, or what's your experience on that one?
I've really enjoyed talking to people when I've run customer service, talking to people who've got a dog barking in the background, or they'll have a child wander up. Yeah. And everybody's talking about making businesses more human. I talk about it a lot. And I think just adding those little extra little noises in the background, then it just gives you the human element. And I think it's really great for engagement between the customer service agent and the customer. I think it's a really good thing, but I know that there's a line to be drawn with that last example you gave, the 2-bedroom flat. I just really don't know how some people could overcome that.
Do you believe it must be overcome, or do you think it's going to be accepted in the longer term?
I think it has to be accepted by the organisation, but whether or not it's accepted by the partner is another matter. And I think that's where the issue lies, is when it messes the home life up. So you can't make a single sound because I'm on a 4-hour shift right now. So you've got to be really quiet or go to the bedroom all day. You know, that's the bit I think it's quite challenging.
So do others believe that the organisation will simply accept the fact that a dog barks or that the noise is out there, people get distracted, even, you know, being at home and walking away anytime I kind of like?
I think we're all on a bit of a journey here, Marianne. I think there's some organisations seem to want to go back to the way it was and insist that everybody goes back to the office 5 days a week, which is entirely their right. But actually, I think, you know, the genie's out of the bottle for a lot of people. Yeah, they're more productive. I mean, I know the amount of time I have now compared to, you know, getting up at 6, leaving the house at 6:30 to get to traffic, working at home. The lifestyle is just incredible. So I suspect we've not got to the end of that development yet. It feels like there'll be a hybrid model, because without a hybrid model, you don't really ever get. It's much harder to drive the right culture if you onboard everyone remotely and they never meet physically with any of their colleagues. But I think there has to be a level of choice involved. So some people would probably want to work from home most of the time. And if they have the ability to do that, then I don't see an issue with that. Other people may want to work in the office most of the time because they simply don't have the space or the Wi-Fi or the technical ability to do it. Where that develops, though, over time, in that people might start to think about, actually, the nature of the work I'm in a contact centre means the vast majority of jobs now allow me to work at home. Therefore, I need to start to rethink my setup at home in terms of, you know, even things like I'm sat in a dining chair at the moment, so it's not the most comfy thing to sit on. My wife, who works at home, she's got her office chair, she's got a proper ergonomic chair. So, you know, I think we're in the middle of a journey. I don't know where it ends, but it absolutely doesn't end with everybody going back into the office 5 days a week.
No, and I think we can probably all agree. Joe, did you just have a thought on that one?
Yeah, it was just to suggest another side of it that, you know, I agree with Tracy and Anthony about there's a personal element to this, definitely, that one size doesn't fit all, and therefore it's about understanding what does the business need, what does the individual need, and then trying to work out that compromise. But I think there is an element of businesses also need to make some firm decisions about how do they achieve consistency? How do they match their brand ideals, their customer service standards? And to some extent, how they protect that while still accommodating the needs of individuals. Again, he's going to take some effort to try strike that balance, I would say.
And I think that ties into that second statement, or actually I used it as the first one. We still, to deliver an excellent service, you still need to have a high level of diligence how you do things, not just what you do, how you do them, and you have to apply the discipline. And what I'm seeing with the discipline in particular, let's say your morning huddles that are now happening online, they cannot be replaced. And we still schedule for these huddles to make sure that we have got this accountability, because one thing that I see is much more difficult to measure, and because we don't see it physically all the time, is this piece of accountability. What am I doing? Who am I doing it for? And why am I doing it? Who do I report to? Because we can't just, you know, pulling a report in the morning and looking at it is one thing. Holding people accountable in a respectful way of what they did so that the numbers came out is something else. And there is a small path that we need to walk before we step into somebody's home life, because the service has still been delivered from home. And I'm learning that questions need to be asked much more carefully, because I do not want to offend anyone. On the flip side, I really absolutely still want to know why, for example, you had 7 small breaks, comfort breaks throughout the day. In the contact center, if it was physical sitting there, you would have come and told me, and you would have said, I have X, Y, and Z today, so therefore I need more breaks. Now you might not. And I am challenged to ask the question in a loving and supporting way, yet I still do need to know. So I think we have quite a lot to do here by way of how do we use the technology and our language, how we speak about what's happening, or how we speak about scheduling, being on time, adherence to schedule, etc., with still putting that discipline there and the rigor, because that's what made the centers initially successful, that there was a certain governance. This is how we do business. And we cannot just go and say, well, we don't care about that governance anymore. We just hope for the best, and people will do. They will want to do, no doubt about that. So don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying they are not willing. I think the honor is on us as contact center leaders to make sure that we strike that balance. Does that resonate with you? I see some nodding and some people thinking.
Yes, it does actually, and I think that when everybody was first thrust into the situation of people working from home, all of a sudden, you kind of have to, I guess, give it a period of time before everything settles. We go, okay, what's the thing with breaks? How are people doing this? People maybe, hopefully, aren't late anymore. There are many bonuses to people working from home, and if the conversation's going, so there's also, did they just take a lot of breaks today? Or do they take a lot of breaks quite often? Is there a pattern to it? And then having the right conversation. That's when team leader, the person that's closest to them, could go in and just say, let's just have a chat. You know, what is it that challenges you every day and how can we get around that? And then using workarounds, depending on the customer demand, using workarounds to say, okay, if you take up that time, then maybe you could work another half an hour extra and that kind of thing. But a little bit of, I should imagine there's more give and take is required for most areas to really open that dialogue. And that's where the communication and engagement skills of the team leader really come into play. And I'm hearing that that's much more important these days, is that they can't just put their head down and do stats all day. They have to be connecting with people all the time. And I think that skill in a team leader has had to rise a lot during this period.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 30 seconds left. Anthony, you seem to have been thinking.
Yeah, 30 seconds. I can talk for England. Two quick things. For me, whether people are working at home or working in the office, I think we speak to them in a respectful way. So I wouldn't be oversensitive to the fact they were working from home. But the key for me, and it's a wider contact centre piece, is I think people working at home means we're having to treat them as adults now, whereas when they're in the centre, often they get treated as...
And we're all back in.
I have so much more I could have said.
Some really good discussions, and I think it's great to kind of do these sessions, and unfortunately they are only an hour long, so try and kind of get as much value in as much as we can. But if there are conversations that are starting to flow with people, then definitely encourage you all to book one-to-one kind of sessions from here and share that best practice and share that experience with each other, so that we can start building that that continued community. But hopefully some really good discussions that happened across the patch in those short, sharp value sessions. What we're going to do now is we're going to move people into one-to-one sessions. So opportunity now, I suppose, to kind of get to know the person in your room in a little bit more detail, understand some of their challenges.
It's like speed dating.
It kind of is, exactly, Anthony. That's the vibe that we're looking for. So it's, we're going to give 10 minutes to have a bit of a conversation around your experiences over the last 12 months. What's worked, what's not worked, what have you taken from the last 15 months that's particularly resonated? And then we'll come back into the final section of today's session and have a little bit of a Q&A. So if there's questions that have come up from the panel sessions that you've just been into that you want to kind of share and you want to build on, that is a brilliant opportunity to build that into some of the discussion for later. So Sarah, I'm going to go for a green light. The pop-up will come up again, so I'll ask you to join your breakout room, and then you should go into a session with at least one person. There might be, if we've got an odd number, there might be a second in there, but it's an opportunity to kind of take those conversations down a level. So feel free to join your rooms. Everybody popping back?
Yep.
Good conversations?
Yeah, very good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Brilliant. The screen is now populating back. I don't think we've lost too many people. We've got all the guest speakers in the room nearly. Yeah, there we go. So useful session, hopefully, to kind of just get to meet people and put a few names to people that you might not necessarily have met in a normal setting. And I think the second or the final part of today is literally over to you guys as the audience. So what I want you to do is, if you've got any questions that you've got for any of the panelists today, so for either Marianne, Eileen, Joe or Graham, drop into the chat section, into just at the bottom where the panel is, and you should be able to drop in, do a hashtag question, and what we'll do is we'll start firing some questions to some of the panelists on some of the things that may be at the forefront of your mind. So if there's anything that you were chatting about in your breakout room that you want to bring in, drop it into the chat and Sarah will pick those questions up, and we can start taking it from there. But I had a question for some of the panelists just to kick us off, just to start, and it was one for I'm going to pick on you, Marianne, first, because it's one that's very topical at the moment and one that I've kind of experienced over probably the last week, and it's just around the stability of the operating platforms for contact centers at the moment. And I think there are still a number of contact centers that still haven't managed to get over that hump around managing demand and managing the operation. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on when will normal service resume, do you think? And what do we need to do to get us back on track?
we would like to say, what do you consider being normal service resumed, right? So we had this topic briefly in the breakout room. I really believe we have a long way to go, because this hybrid model is here to stay, and I think we all agree it is here to stay, which in return then depends on if we are making the best out of all the artificial intelligence that we have got, all this way of doing business differently. By the time we get to speak to an agent, there is a different skill set required, a different way of dealing with the customer required, and what we would call the agent role, and that was my last conversation with Tracy, the agent role will be changing. And that means how we manage that will change. So for example, average handling time, if you still have it, you're probably in the last century. And it will take a while for everybody to realize that.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I did a post on social media about average handling time, and it definitely put the cat amongst the pigeons. And I think if you were looking at sort of like metrics for the future, what are the ones that people should be focusing on that can kind of help support that operating rhythm?
Customer effort score. How easy can I get in touch and get my query resolved? I think that is absolutely going to be coming to the forefront. Yes, we still need to manage how many people have we got. We still need to kind of have an eye on if somebody's on a call for 45 minutes, if there's something wrong there. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing that, but it's much more going towards how can we ensure that the customer get the query answered. There should not be a second or third contact. It should be first resolution. By the time somebody speaks to me, I owe this person a solution, because they have done everything else. They have gone to FAQ, they have chatted, they have had a chatbot, they had it all. So now what?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think Tracy, I can see Tracy nodding furiously there. I've seen a recent post where Tracy's also mentioned something similar. Like, I've seen your website, I've been on it, I still need to speak to you. I'm going to ask Paul Jarman to take himself off mute, and I think this question is probably best aimed at Joe. So Paul, if you take yourself off mute, and you can ask Joe your question, which is around enabling contact. So Paul, over to you.
So technologically, obviously, there's loads of stuff that's gone on to make calls happen or to make contact happen, whether it be a chat, an email, a call. But I don't see much, maybe I missed it, where people are really focusing on creating quality in coaching or leadership and mentoring engagement with team leaders to agents, or maybe even senior team managers to team managers, depending on the structure. And I just wonder if I've missed something, or whether there's still work to do and technology companies are still working out how to get that done, because it's clearly much more difficult than face-to-face. So that's the flavour of what I wanted to get a sense of.
Interesting question, Joe.
Yeah, no, Paul, I totally agree with you. And I think it does seem to me that, you know, when we were all working in offices in our previous lives, if you like, it was so much easier to do this, you know, in the office. So I agree with you. And I think, you know, from a technology point of view, I think that I see a bit of a gap in the market, to be honest with you, on some technology to help the managers learn coaching skills. And I also think as well, managers and leaders need some additional training on, you know, how to support remote people. I think there's some companies out there who've done this for many years, do a really, really good job. But I think for a lot of us, I definitely think training moving forward and management development. And I think the focus during the last 15 months has been a lot on, you know, the team leaders supporting everyone, but also have we been supporting them, and do they need some leadership training moving forward? I would say absolutely.
Brilliant. I think you're spot on there, and I know a good leadership development consultant that could help with that.
Yeah, you know what, I was thinking of you.
Brilliant. I'm going to invite Bev to take yourself off mute. So Bev's got a question around very topical mental health support. So I think Eileen, you're probably best equipped to deal with this one. So Bev, take yourself off mute and let you ask your question.
Yeah, it's you probably have seen it in the comments. It's my concern is, yeah, I absolutely agree with most people in here who've said that hybrid is the way forward, and I do support that. My concern and partly from my own experiences, I'm thinking about when we do start to go back to the office, and there's a whole debate about how much time people are going to work from home or not. How are we going to support people to make the right decision? Because I don't know about anybody else, but I've got some people who are absolutely convinced that they're doing really well working from home, but I can see changes in personality, changes in behaviour, changes in level of performance. So it's how do we make sure that we get the right model for the company and the individual, and making sure that their mental health is supported appropriately, because you don't want to get into a bun fight about you have to come back to the office. But if it's the right thing for them to at least be in, you know, a considerable part of the time, because they need that engagement, they need that support, how do we facilitate that?
Brilliant question, Bev. I think it's worth saying right from the outset that well-being is highly subjective. So what works for you wouldn't necessarily work for me. And therefore, the key thing in the work from home, coming to the office, is this element of choice. So there has been research that looks at what's the optimum number of days that you should work from home. Now, of course, that was pre-pandemic, so we might as well just ignore that. It was around 2 or 3 days, but let's ignore that because that's when you had a choice. I think one of the things that's really not worked for us in the pandemic is the fact that we had no choice about the fact that we had to work from home. So I think that needs to be considered when you start to draw up policies around, well, what is our flexible working policy around this? I think the key word is flexible, and there should be an element of choice. The more choice someone has, the more they're likely to have a work-life balance, and work-life balance is a significant driver of well-being, or lack of work-life balance is a significant of poor well-being. But interestingly, you're seeing that some people think they're doing all right, but they're not. So there are objective measures and subjective measures when it comes to well-being. If you use a mix of those, then you're actually going to be able to almost shine a light on their own state of well-being in a way that they weren't even aware. So some of those objective measures, of course, would be things like performance. You can also benchmark some of those measures with national benchmarks. So someone may think that, I don't know, 4 out of 6 is okay, whereas everybody else is getting a 5, you know, that kind of thing. And so shining a light on the fact that actually they're below average will also give them information. But I think that's where possibly the line managers, again, I'm going to echo what Joe said, the line managers are so key as a group who have the visibility of how their employees are doing. And they're the ones who have the most control or flexibility in how the work is designed. And yet they are the ones who need the most support probably as well. So it's empowering them to be able to make those right decisions in a consultative type of way with the employee themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point there. And I think Sue Froud has just messaged me in the background because she had some comments off the back of that. And then I want to come to Rhiannon for a question for Marianne. So Sue, take yourself off mute and just share your thoughts.
Yeah, I was just going to let you know, we went home like everybody else 23rd of March, and we suddenly had to give everybody laptops and get the IT equipment going and raid the offices for everything to make sure that people were working from home. What we've done over the past year is we've done regular surveys in finding out how people are, and we've now opened the offices, but only for those people who really can't work at home and want to come in for the mixed working life. We are not looking to have 5 days a week back in the office going forward. We want everybody to have a flexible working approach, which as HR I'm really pleased about. It's what we've been fighting for years. So we've put a lot of work and effort into both coaching all the team managers, speaking to the staff. I still spend about 80% of my day, which is still a lot at the moment, in speaking to staff, in signposting staff to relevant agencies and professional agencies, making sure that our health and wellbeing supports our staff with all of our benefits, and really coaching the managers in any issues that they might have with staff who feel that they're doing a good job, but SLAs and KPIs tell us perhaps they're not as good as they think they are. Or similarly, those who are struggling, who really need a bit of time out or a supportive working practice. That's still going to be ongoing. I can see that absolutely happening this year. We've put a lot more training programs into place. We've put a lot of toolkits still into place. But I think hopefully by the end of it, when we come out at the end this year, God forbid, and fingers crossed, we will have a fantastic flexible working model that will enhance everybody's lifestyle, if you like. They will be able to come into the office in their teams for 1 or 2 days a week, and that will be a very good engagement activity that we will go by. And it will be what it should be, which is a lot of support, a lot of work, but actually support for the team managers, the operational directors, and all the staff on the ground, still meeting what we need to hit the client's SLAs. And
I think that lends nicely to the point that Rhiannon was going to make. So Rhiannon, if I could tee you up to ask you a question, I think probably best placed to Marianne, but some of the other panelists may have a view as well. Over to you.
Pulled my headset off at that time, sorry. So yeah, just hearing people talking about the challenges and what the customers now want, I'm sitting here thinking, well, surely that does mean the type of people that we need to hire and develop and retain in our customer facing roles, surely that's got to be different as well. So what are the skills, the traits, the competencies that we think are needed now for our people facing, our customer facing roles, and also for managers of those people as well? Has that profile changed?
Should we start with Marianne, and then I think Joe may have a view on that as well?
Has that profile changed? Yes, it has, but only in regards to it brings very much to the forefront what a customer service agent should have been doing for the last 20 years already. So in every single advert you see, oh, you need to be able to problem solve, you need to be able to do this, you need to be able to do that, you need to have listening skills, you need to be able to show sympathy with the customer. This has always been there, but now it becomes crucial. And from my point of view, empathy is more important than sympathy, and this is not the same.
Yes.
People need to be able to listen and not just hear. They really need to be able to see what customer is saying in between the lines, basically. And the other one really is they need to be truly empowered to make a decision. And not being told, the customer doesn't want to be told, yeah, I look into this, I send you an email or I ring you back. Oh, now you need to fill in a form and we get back to you. This is gone. Yeah. This is not there anymore. So yes, what the skill of the advisor will change. They will become clear subject matter experts. And on the back of that, if I just may say so, also their profile, their salaries, how we treat them as adults, as Anthony said earlier, this needs to change. And hopefully that changes the industry.
Yeah, I completely see where you're coming from there, because traditionally we haven't, have we? You know, call center agents have just been quick and dirty. We'll hire them, we'll get them in and we need them and to get on with it. And then we wonder why. You know, we track all of these metrics around how quick calls are answered, how efficient people are. But actually, that's not what the client and the customer really wants.
No.
Brilliant. Correct. So I'm going to ask Bev. You've got another question, and this one's for Graham. It's more of a techie question. So Bev, take yourself off mute. Over to Graham. Over to you, Bev. To Graham.
You're not picking on me today. I tell you, I should have asked you.
You keep asking the questions.
In other words, you're saying shut up. No, I'm only kidding. My question is around the technology side. Obviously, technology has just come to the fore through the pandemic, and thank God, you know, that the tech boards have responded as well as they have, or I think we'd all be in Clear Street. But what worries me is I've done a couple of major implementations, but they were on-site implementations. And we found it really, really hard to onboard the technology, train people properly, make sure they understood how to use the system, and more importantly, how to get the best out of it. But also to understand where people were perhaps not using it as they should. When you've got somebody on site in a room where you can train them face to face and see what they're up to, that's relatively straightforward, and you can put metrics in place that sort of monitor how they're behaving. But when you're all working remotely and you've thrown a new system out there and you've done your best to train people remotely, how is it more difficult? And have we seen that implementations have not gone as well as they had when you had people face to face in a room and could train them in a different way? I just wanted to understand the
Interesting
impact.
question. Graham, what's your view on that one?
Yeah, great question. I guess we've probably all experienced all or some of that in the last year or so, and probably even before. But I think the whole notion of the fact that people they didn't have a choice. So planning was a luxury. And I guess with all these things, if you're failing to plan, you're planning to fail. It's a bit hackneyed, but it's true. So it's all about ensuring that you set off with a really good detailed understanding of the implication of all these things. And like you've said, Beverly, it's so wide ranging. Everything from, you know, the setup, have you got the right kind of connectivity? Have you got the right bandwidth? Have you got the right environment, the right components, if you like, of the enabling technology? The question of how you monitor all that, yes, it's always going to be a little bit more challenging, because, you know, if you're sitting in a room with half a dozen other people, or a dozen people, or 100 people, you can actually see. So you've got the benefit of being able to see what's going on, and, you know, you've got that first-hand experience. So I guess this is one of those classics. It's, you know, a bend in the road's not the end of the road unless you fail to take the turn. So it's about understanding what that turn looks like. So what tools have we got that we can monitor? So monitoring what's going on, they're all useful things. But I guess it comes back to the people thing. You know, technology is fantastic, but it is all about the people. So how do we empower the people so that they understand what's happening in their world, so that they can talk, they can reach for help? How do we train the managers to observe and notice and make sure that they're taking care of these things? And yes, I think the whole idea of the training and the preparation is really important, but there's loads of technology there. Technology itself isn't the challenge. How you implement it, how you enable people around it, that's the hard bit.
I think Keith Stopford's put a book recommendation in the chat around Amy Edberton, the fearless organization, and I think that's a really kind of key point there. Is actually, when we're going through periods of change, when we're implementing technology, we have to think about the culture that we're trying to create. I'm going to give you the 60-second microphone, Keith, just to summarize your thoughts and your recommendation for that one, and then we'll start to wrap up.
Yeah, I just threw it in there as a recommendation. There's I have a business review article come out recently, which is sort of updating some of the key messages in that relevant to this hybrid world. I also like the point that Anthony made, is we're on a journey here. I don't think we're yet at a point to say this is how things are going to be. So certainly I think that one of Amy's key messages is involve the people in shaping that culture, shaping that future. What do they want to see? And that, you know, I think from a longer term perspective, that will help things like recruitment, onboarding, retention, all of the challenges we've got in contact centres and other organisations, really. But a great read, very practical stuff. Highly recommend it.
Pop everybody on. Could you just go on mute if you're not talking? That might be you, Nigel. Thanks. Cheers, Keith.
Cheers, Gary. Thank you.
Brilliant. So we are literally like 2 minutes away from the end of the 12th month of the Contact Centre Network, and I just want to say a huge thank you to all the panelists, both all four that have attended today, and all that have been and gone. But more importantly, thank you to everybody that turns up every month. I didn't expect to garner much of a following with this. I was surprised anybody turned up at all. It's like just me putting myself out there to the world. But as long as people are attending and continue to attend, I will keep hosting these because I really enjoy them. I think it's a brilliant way of pulling people together. It's really great that people from the community that we all love, the contact center community, are able to kind of come and share value, share experience, and just share best practice. So I think it's really great. Some fantastic questions that have come out the chat. Hopefully the format's worked well for everybody today. I know the first discussion session felt like it, blink and you'll miss it. But that's because the conversation is so great. We're having the next session on the 27th of May, and we're going to be talking about how to form great QA strategies and still deliver good customer outcomes. And we've got some guest speakers that are going to be joining us for that for next month. More of those will be announced as and when they come on. But I've thoroughly enjoyed the last 12 months bringing this together. And I'd like to just say thank you to everybody for turning up. And hopefully I'll see you all on our continued contact center network events going forward. So
happy birthday.
Yeah,
happy birthday.
Well done, mate.
Thanks everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
See you all
Bye.
next time. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.